Enhance.
Boom. We are now live with paraglidingtalk.com with Gavin McClurg. Whoa! That was a test for all of your speakers and your microphones. We're so glad that that you're here. If you're logging in, if you're checking in with this, we are in for an absolute treat. Yes. So Gavin is here with us. He's in an undisclosed bunker somewhere in the Netherlands, and we are going to hopefully where our Wi-Fi will stay good and hot and connected. And we also have a couple other guests, the moderators, Kyle O, who's a paramotor pilot. He was on the last episode. We also have Chris Dewey, another YouTube sensation. He has a great channel. Also, Nick Hawks, owner of Paleo Treats, one of my favorite pilots to fly with. We've been flying together since we were little babies.
Almost since the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, so anyways, no more nonsense. We're here tonight. We have I've been listening to the podcast Cloudbase Mayhem. Can somebody say, man, look at this shirt? This
nice.
Is Cloudbase Mayhem representing. Got the Cloudbase Mayhem hat. Gavin hosts the show. He has a whole library. Take a look in the description for details and links to those. And without further ado, Gavin McClurg, folks, he's here. So excited.
Hey everybody! Thanks for joining in. Psyched to have a little chat.
So Gavin, we're going to rapid fire ask you questions. No, I'm just kidding. That's not what we're going to do. I have a few things that we want to ask you and talk to you about, and I've pre-sent out some of the questions, so I'm not going to use those questions. We're going to go straight into the guts. Did you memorize your entire TED speech?
Yeah, totally. God, I'm glad you brought that up. TED, 18 minutes, dude. Well, actually, it wasn't quite 18 minutes because I filled in a few little blanks with some video because there was, when I first started that TED project, they contact you and they give you like, okay, well, do you want a 4-minute slot, 6-minute slot, 9, and they have a bunch of ranges, and the most you could take was 18 minutes. And I was like, hey, I'm an interesting guy. I'll take 18 minutes. And then I was like, shit, what have I done? It was brutal. And so then I thought, okay, well, I can't remember 18 minutes of content. My mind doesn't work that way. I'm not an actor. So I did use a few little short clips. So I think ended up being about 15 minutes of actually talking. But yeah, man, that was super stressful because they're on you the whole way. It's TED, and so they're checking in with you, and they want it. First they want the script, and I got back from the X-Alps. I mean, it was basically supposed to be done before I left for the X-Alps, but it was the X-Alps. It was like there's priorities here, even with TED. So I didn't do anything before I left, just assuming like, I got a lot of stuff to talk about. I'll be able to just bang this out. And I got back from the X-Alps, and like 2 weeks after that, I had a kid. And so, yeah, I was like woefully behind that whole thing. I just kept telling them, yeah, everything's cool. Everything's great. And, but about 3 weeks before I went up to Canada to give that, I got serious about it. I recorded it using my podcast gear, and I put it all on, note cards, kind of each paragraph, broke it down. And then I just started with like just first paragraph. And that took me like 3 days. The second paragraph, and man, I'll tell you what. Before I went up there the night before and gave it, and it was perfect. But there's nobody in the audience. It was just them testing everything. Oh. And the next morning, I was the first one up, so it was 3 hours of talks, and I was basically there for entertainment. It was all about education. I don't know much about education. There we go. There it is. And so I like 15 minutes before I went on stage, my mind just went totally blank. I was just like, holy shit, I've forgotten the whole thing. I don't know what I'm going to say. And because I don't usually really get nervous. I've done a ton of public speaking. I really like public speaking. But for some reason, it just was like, I don't know, it hit me. And I was petrified before I went up on stage. And then I got on stage, and I looked out at the audience, and everybody had this big smile on their face, and I was like, you're my people. And it all went fine. So luckily, I didn't come off the rails too much. But really embarrassingly, I gave the exact same talk here to my peeps in Ketchum. So they're like, this is to everybody here that knows me and that's seen the films and all that kind of stuff. And like, I just thought, because they were my people, that I wouldn't be nervous at all. I didn't do any prep because I had thought that I had it completely memorized, which I did, but I totally blew it. I've never actually totally blown a live talk, and it was absolutely horrifying. I mean, I think I pulled it together at the end a little bit, but man, it was embarrassing. I'd done this monster mountain bike ride, like right before it. So as soon as I sat down and they were kind of introducing me, I realized, oh my God, I'm like super dehydrated. And so about one paragraph into it, I had to stop and go get a drink of water because I was doing like,
yeah.
It was terrible.
I saw
like
that.
The opening line, you know, I got through the Kung Fu Panda stuff, but like the opening paragraph, one of the lines is, you know, the English philosopher Derek Parfit said, you know, and I couldn't even remember what he said.
Oh no!
So I tried to pull. I was like, oh, I can't even remember what he said, but it was just terrible. Well, so I'm going back east to give it again to another group of people after the New Year, and then I'm gonna take it seriously. Because man, I don't have any trouble talking, but when it's memorizing, that's a different ball game. It was brutal.
So you were able to memorize Nadine Stair's whole thing. That impressed me. I'm like,
that took forever.
And you rattled it off really smooth. I'm watching and I'm thinking, gosh, did he memorize that? So I didn't know it by heart. So I went, looked at it, and I followed it, and I'm like, amazingly so. He had it totally memorized. And I'm like, okay, that's one of the questions. I'm going to write that down. And so I figured we'd start the show with that.
My life over again. I dare to make more mistakes this time. I'd relax. I'd limber up. Yeah, I've got that one down. But what
it's so incredible.
And it was actually, it was totally true. That whole story. You know, when I instructed for Outward Bound, I was mid to late 20s when I was instructing, which was quite a bit older than most of the other instructors that I worked with all the time. Mostly they're coming out of college. And you know, you could see it. And this was, you know, the whole point of the whole TED Talk was like, this was before smartphones. This is just when flip phones were coming out, and I didn't have one, you know, but the kids did. And that was the hardest thing, was making them leave all that stuff behind at the beginning of these 30-day trips. So you could see at the end of these, you know, 29 days, 30 days, they're getting so excited to go see their friends and get back to their phone. And I was like, wait a minute, these kids have learned something here. And they're like totally different people than they were 30 days ago. Not all of them, but a lot. It was cool to see this kind of transformation and this confidence. And it was cool. So for some reason, I latched onto that quote because I really felt like it connected with them, you know, because usually when you're a kid, you don't give a shit what older people say or think. But, you know, that was like this 80-year-old woman's going, hey, I played my life wrong, and here's what I did wrong. And, you know, here's a little kernel of advice. I hope you get it right. And so every single course I taught, I always ended on that one. You know, the kids seemed to dig it. So, but memorizing it, that's another thing.
So you've got some, and before we get into the nitty gritty of paragliding talking, you did some major climbing stuff in Bolivia. And so I would just want to ask you, what was your experience with that, and where were you at that point in your life, in your adventure?
So first, I gotta say, it wasn't major. It was, I thought it was major at the time, but it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't even mountaineering. So when the last couple years, I got super into climbing after my ski racing career ended. So after all the knee problems and all that stuff, and I ended up going back to school because I'd been ski racing and I hadn't done much school. So I went to the University of Colorado, met some guys there that were really into climbing, and we got really into sport climbing because that's all we knew about. And so we sport climbed. And then, you know, of course, because it was me and my personality, you know, I started dieting and training all the time and going to the climbing gym. And that was kind of a new thing back then with climbing gyms. Like, this is early 90s. And then did a semester abroad, one of these like exchange things. And I went down to Australia and met a couple guys down there. And at that point I had a rack, but I didn't even know how to use it, like free climbing. And a couple of those guys were kind of into it, and they were just learning. And so we got more into like lead climbing and using gear, and and that just opened up a whole new world of stuff. But I mean, I was never that great, and I was never that. I got into kayaking before the climbing really took off, and then the first day I went kayaking was the last day I went climbing, because I was like, wow, this is a lot more fun, and I'm like laughing, and this is cool. And then of course I got into the really serious end of kayaking, and then that became not so fun after a while, because all we were running was stuff that was totally death-defying and super scary. And so, but yeah, so Bolivia was so the part of the TED Talk, and you can watch the TED Talk. I won't give it to you right now, but that's online. But really, what that was all about was that I was graduating, and I was in business school because my dad said I should go to business school because I didn't know what degree I should get, and he was like, "Well, get something useful." So I went to business school, which was like buy low, sell high. You graduate. That seemed obvious, but yeah, I don't think I'd actually learned that much in business school. But all of my business school buddies, all the people that I went to school with, were like immediately, they were going from school to like KPMG and Deloitte and Touche, and I'm not knocking that, but it just seemed really boring to me. Like, wow, you're going to assign your life away like right now to a big corporate entity in Dallas or wherever those places were. And that didn't seem very exciting to me. I just knocked Dallas. I don't mean anything against Dallas, but you know what I mean? It just didn't fit my personality. And so I decided to go down to South America to climb. And I had like $1,500. And
so
turns out really cheap. You could be down there a long time.
Well, who inspired you to do that? At what point were you like, let's just go on this adventure?
I honestly, I don't remember. I couldn't find anybody to go with me. I met a guy at the time. I was working in the summers. I was working in Vail for this music company, and they would do like it was chamber music at people's homes, and then also the symphony, like the New York Symphony would come in, and we were like we were like the roadies. We handled all the lights, and we were carriers of heavy objects basically, and so we would set up a stage and do all that stuff. And I did that for quite a few summers, and ended up meeting this kid there that hadn't even gone to school. And he was pretty keen to go down to South America and do some climbing. And so we drove across the country because it was cheaper to fly out of Atlanta than it was Denver. And so we drove out there and just had a one-way ticket to Bolivia. And
wow.
2 weeks into the trip, he met a girl and he took off. He wasn't too interested in climbing anymore. And I'll tell you an interesting story. This was like, I didn't know what I was doing. And but when I got there, before I went, I got one of those Lonely Planet. I think Nick and I talked about this once. I got a Lonely Planet like South America guide. This is like when Lonely Planet was still pretty new. But everybody knows Lonely Planet now. And it was like, the big one, because it was every country in South America, all 9 of them. And I got down there to Bolivia, and I get to La Paz, and it's this city at 12,000 feet in this huge bowl, and there's 4 huge mountains all over 20,000 feet around it. And I'm like, oh my God, it was really exciting. I'm out of college and I'm traveling, and I'm loaded. I've got like $1,500. I'm like, God, I could maybe be down here for 5 years. And checked into the hotel or whatever it was. It was like a backpacker type place. Backpacking was just kind of getting big then. And I noticed that everywhere I went, there's all these white people, because I had the white people book, and I was like, God, this doesn't seem very authentic. This seems stupid. And I had that book for like a day. And then I just remember I walked by a trash can one day and I threw it away. And then the traveling got a lot more interesting. I had no idea where to go and what to do. And then you just ask people. And that was my first kind of like real world lesson about kind of just going and doing it. So I don't know. I'm not answering your question. I don't know where the inspiration came from. It was more just, it was more fear of what everybody else was doing. That to me just seemed really scary. And it seemed like it was consigning my life to something that was like, God, is that it? And I had no idea what I wanted to do. But that was super instrumental for me because it worked. It was cool. There was, this guy got stabbed. I was trying to get to Manaus at one point. I was on a river boat, and the top level of the boat at night, everybody'd start partying like crazy, and some dude disappeared, and turned out he'd gotten stabbed. And then a good buddy of mine that I met that was from Portugal. He ended up getting some kind of nasty dysentery and I had to take him to the hospital. Like, cool things happened on that trip. And but we survived and we came home. And then I came home and I was like, ooh, man, I don't know. That was pretty fun. I should try to find a job where I could just go do that again. So eventually, that's all kind of part of that TED Talk.
So mixed into that TED Talk, you mentioned you had 50 jobs by your late 20s. And so I want to ask you real quick, what was the worst of all of those?
Oh my God, that's so easy to answer. So I got a job. One of the jobs I got was in retail. So a buddy of mine in Vail. So I had the music gig in the summer, and that was always amazing and good money, and that allowed me to save money. And one winter, I had screwed up my knee again, and I'd had another knee surgery, and so I was in Vail. I think it was like over Christmas. The timing here might be wrong, but a buddy of mine got me a job at the John Galt. So those of you who are Ayn Rand fans might remember that.
Of course, buddy.
And
Yeah.
really kind of high-end retail place in Vail. I got fired by noon of my first day because I couldn't fold clothes. he was like, okay, you're new in retail and you don't know anything about sales, so I can't have you on the cash register and I can't have you talking to people because clearly you don't give a shit about clothes. And but so I'll teach you how to fold. And he took 4 hours, the owner of the store, and he took 4 hours to try to teach me how to fold clothes. I still can't fold clothes. I've never figured that out. My mom still, when she comes for Christmas, she'll be here next week. She'll ask me if she wants to fold clothes for me. I can't do it. I just can't. And he had to fire me.
Oh, buddy.
So I want to just interject real quick. We got 33 people are watching now. And so I want to just recap real quick. We have Gavin McClurg. He is a world record holder for paragliding, flew across the Rockies in Canada all the way. I can't remember even how many kilometers or how many miles that was. An incredible video. You can check that out. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. Also he's sailed around the world a couple times. He's been on TED, I think more than once. Is that correct?
No, just once, and only TEDx. There's a big difference.
TEDx. Okay. And so he was named Most Adventurous Man of the Year by National Geographic. We're talking about some amazing things. Adventure. I'm an adventure person. I love adventure. I've always been crazy about that. And so, Gavin, I think you're my dad. Are you my dad? No? My dad's actually probably watching. But just an incredible amount of stuff. And so I want to get into that. Please, if you get a chance.
A couple corrections before we get too far.
Yeah,
I don't have a world record. I've only got a North American foot launch record. So that was set from here about 5 years ago from Sun Valley. So I don't have a world record. I guess I have a world record if you count the Alaska Traverse.
Yeah.
Nobody's seen that. But
exactly.
And then National Geographic Adventurer of the Year. There were other ones. They pick out 10 of those. So yeah. Anyway, but that was a couple years ago. That was thrilling. That was pretty exciting. I've been wondering how you get that for a long time.
That's incredible. And so if you get a chance to check some of these things out, let me put a plug in for our website. It's paraglidingtalk.com. We just recently started this. We've got 2 episodes on there. You can see those past episodes. Want to encourage you to go get on the email list so you can find out who's coming up next. Also want to encourage you to check out some of Gavin's sponsors. Gavin has not asked us to do anything as far as monetary or anything. We're just a paragliding community that wants to learn more. And like Hawks is texting me, he's like, get into theory, get into flying theory. We're going to get into that. We're going to also the sponsors, some of the sponsors we had wanted to just mention real quick while we're in the middle of the heat is Patagonia.
I got those for you, man. Right here.
You got those if you'll pull those up.
Mm-hmm.
You just put him live. And by the way, this is live, so some of this stuff I'm just fumbling through. Can everybody see that? Is that live stream or is that just on me?
It came out for a bit.
How's that? Good now?
There we go.
Okay, so it's Patagonia on it, Nivic, Garmin, and also Vespa Energy. Want to mention those, and
Saleva.
and Soleva. That's it. I overlooked that one. But also, if you go to Garmin.com, you get there's a discount of 10% if you use the code Gavin2017. And so wanted to just put those plugs in. I think that is it. Other than I want to encourage you to, if you don't know about the Cloudbase Mayhem, there's a link in the description. Go take a look at Cloudbase Mayhem. Get involved with listening to those. If you are a pilot, if you are even a brand new pilot, you are going to learn so many things from this. So I want to encourage you, go check that out. And also join the Patreon support Gavin's channel. He's been putting a lot of work, a lot of effort into this, and needs to get hooked up for what he's, I can say that personally, I'm still alive potentially because of some of those podcasts. And I know that I've heard that from so many guys that listen to that podcast that they've been helped out greatly by those. And so for that, thank you, Gavin. I really appreciate, and we love your show. And everybody that I talk to is, they obsess about your show. And so we always get excited when a new one comes out. And
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just put a quick plug in for it too. We've got a new show. Just as soon as we wrap this, I'll get it up tonight with Miguel Gutierrez. He's the magician that runs Alas Alombre. He's been putting on comps down in Valle for many, many years. Their team is just amazing. That will have the code for the Garmin InReach. So if you're looking for something for Christmas, to tell your significant other, that'll have that code for the discount for the InReach device, which everybody needs to have. Don't go Spot, go InReach. It just save your life. So yeah, and the podcast is just me talking to, sometimes the best pilots in the world. Other times people are just getting into it. I had a great one with Nick, who's sitting here. A couple different episodes with him. So it's just about sharing knowledge, and that's kind of the cool thing about our community is we're good at doing that. So thank you guys for having me on the show.
Gavin, I gotta interject, man. When I first started getting into paragliding, I started looking for podcasts, and I stumbled across episode number 1 had just come out with your podcast there, and I was like, oh, good, man. So I've been in on every one of them, and when I started, I didn't even know some of the stuff that y'all were talking about. I was so green. And,
awesome.
I can't tell you how many times you've been in my ear while I'm mowing the yard or traveling to a mountain or something, and it burns me up when I don't have the time to listen to it. So
that's very
cool.
Thanks,
man. It's huge, man. It really is huge.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean,
your master
is just cool.
Hey, your master classes on YouTube, I love them. They're brief, and they just kind of give us a picture into your thought process when you're flying. You're just kind of thinking about what's important right now. I'm in the moment. What do I need?
Yeah, that we should give a shout out to Andre. He filmed all that. We weren't planning on that. I had this kind of weekend courses up in the UK last April as part of the film tour with North Unknown over there, and Andre filmed those. You can find those on his YouTube page, or if you follow him on Facebook. I think you guys are having him as a guest here pretty soon. So
yeah,
I think there's 10 episodes. Basically, he just recorded everything I said. So that was really nice. I think I had actually this shirt on in those. But yeah, there's a lot of knowledge there. Not all of it mine. A lot of it's just been distilled from my own mentors and teachers over the years. So they're great, and thanks for Andre for doing that.
That is so cool. So with that said, before we go to we're going to go to the chat and let those guys ask some questions. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about paragliding, and want to start with the ground handling part. And so maybe Nick, if you can kind of just jump in here at any point. And I consider Nick one of the inspirations for learning ground handling, and your podcast that you did about ground handling and the importance of it.
Cool. So Gavin, we've talked a little bit about this. It's funny you hit on it in a couple things that you're talking about before, when you said, when I got ready for my TED talk, and I'm thinking, listening to that, God, TED doesn't have anything to do with paragliding. But it's just this piece of you that you're super psyched on preparing really well for whatever you're doing. So maybe it'd be useful, because many of us started listening to your podcast as kind of 0-hour pilots. That was definitely me out here. Me and Robert are at least, right around 50-hour pilots. Can you talk a little bit about how much ground handling still plays a part in your life as whatever it is, a 10,000-hour pilot or whatever you're getting close to?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It comes a little bit in waves because I consider it part of training. So, if I'm in a training period, which is like last year for the X-Alps, I'm trying to go and ground handle in kind of the worst conditions possible whenever they arise, which in the winter and the spring, they're all the time. So, basically the days that I can't fly, I'm trying to ground handle. So it just depends. There are times when it really spikes, and there are times where it's, but I kind of feel like I always need to do more. I'll never be good enough. And I really feel like ground handling is going to save my life. And so, in the X-Alps, it would be suicide if you weren't super, super good at ground handling to undertake that event. And interestingly, I'll give you some more perspective on this. So Ben Abruzzo, my trainer, my physical trainer, who Nick, he's doing the X-Pier. Well, if he gets in, we'll know here in another couple of weeks, but he's applied to do the X-Pier, which is kind of like half the length of the X-Alps. It starts on the west coast of Spain, goes to the east coast. Really cool event. Nothing like the funding and just the backbone that the X-Alps has, because that's Red Bull, but a really cool event. And, Kriegel wins it every year like he does the X-Alps. So there's some real talent in that race. And I'm going to be his supporter in the X-Pier. And so what we've decided, so the roles have kind of switched. He's doing his own physical training because he knows way more about that than I do anyway. So I'm not helping him with that. But what I am helping him with is I'm writing all of his training for flying, basically, to get his flying up to speed. And he's a pretty low hour pilot. I'm guessing here, but he's probably 150, 200 hours. And so, he's not going to be a huge threat in the race as long as there's flying going on. He's an animal on the ground, so he'll shred everybody on the ground. But I think anyway, I'm writing his flying training just like he does my physical training. So we do it all in Google Docs and Excel, and I just give him a week of stuff. And, of course he bends it depending on the days that he's got and the time that he's got and the weather they have. But 4 out of 5 is ground handling, especially in the winter. It's just ground handling and ground handling and ground handling and ground handling. Okay, go do some top landing, and then ground handling and ground handling and ground handling. Okay, and go do some spot lands and ground handling, ground handling. Okay, go do some SIV and ground handling, and go do a bunch of stalls today, and stuff that he can safely do over the dirt down there in Albuquerque. But so of course, on a good day, he goes and flies, and and sets tasks and does all the stuff that he needs to be doing to learn how to fly well. But most of it's just ground handling, because I know that he's not going to die if you can ground handle well, you're a good pilot. You don't even need to you don't need to get in the air. You're already a good pilot. So that's how important I think it is.
Do you mind if I might jump in there a little bit?
Sure.
I'm going to ask your permission to share, because I know that I'm looking at that X-Pier Google sheet right now. I know there's a bunch of other stuff on there, but I'd like to kind of hit a couple of those things that are on there, and then you can riff on whatever you want. So
sure.
Part of this is like the basic technical stuff, or the basic mind stuff, study the X-Pier route. And then there's top landing practice. On a decent flying day, go upwind as much as possible. Set a hanging place at your home, super dial in your race kit, do a ground handling course, set up cones on the ground, and then in a big field, try to complete a convoluted X course as many times as you can, and then hike and fly. So any of those, I think, are kind of good jumping off points for thinking about what this show is really about, which is training paragliding to be, if not a more excellent pilot. So yeah, any of those that you want to talk about, whether it's the ground handling and running around cones, or it's top landing or upwind or whatever, take it, run with it.
Yeah, for sure. Some of this is covered in that master's class pretty well too. But so here's how I rate paragliding in terms of like skill and difficulty and risk. On the one end, you've got like Torrey Pines. Okay, so it's ridge soaring. It doesn't get much easier than that. Doesn't get much safer than that. Of course, there's still risk, but like at one end of paragliding, you've got ridge soaring, where maybe the biggest risk is getting blown over the back, which can be really bad. So I'm not discounting it, but and then you get a little bit better, and you discover this thing called cross-country paragliding. I didn't even have any idea what that was the first couple of years that I flew. I was like, wait, what? People take off from somewhere and they go somewhere else, and they don't even know where that somewhere else is. So then at that point, you start getting into all these other, I call them fundamentals, ground handling, forechecks, SIV, super important, stalls, wingovers, your basic maneuvers, but that tend to be really hard to get really good at. Wingovers is probably the hardest, but super essential to being a good pilot. And then you maybe start doing some comps. There might be some open comps where you're flying a B-class wing, and it's all more like beer can racing and sailing. It's mellow, it's easy, it's not super dynamic, it's not super risky, all the way up to the World Cup. PWC and Worlds. These are the best pilots in the world, racing the fastest gliders, racing the most high aspect gliders that are really, really hard to recover if something goes wrong. And then there's bivvy flying, way beyond a World Cup, in my opinion. Now, does it have to be super risky? Does it have to be super challenging? No. You can go to the Alps. You can sign up with Antoine Lorenz or Toby Colomb or Jockey Sanderson and do little mini bivvy trips where you're getting great sight briefings and great access to weather, and you're not flying very far, and they're landing at the good time of the day, and you're getting a lot of support, and you're with great people, and you're studying routes. And it doesn't have to be gnarly, but when you start throwing in top landing in the middle of the day, or flying deep lines that either nobody's been or very few people have been, or there's not very much knowledge, where especially if you're in the big mountains and weather has a tendency to blow up fast, our sport doesn't get any riskier than that. I don't know what would be more risky than that. So, that what I've tried to design for Ben is basically yes, there is more risky than that. Then you take vol biv and you add no sleep and you add gnarly physical and racing. So you're adding ego, you're adding, pressure, you're adding all these other things that really don't belong in paragliding whatsoever. And so you're taking bivvy, which is already super dicey, and then you're adding the race component. And so what I'm basically trying to do there with all those things that you've just mentioned and more in his learning progression is trying to tap as many of those possible things as we can for someone who's 150, 200 hours, because you can learn all that stuff in a low hours pilot, but it's an accelerated it's basically what I've tried to do is make it a very, very accelerated lesson plan with the least risk possible, knowing that he's going into something that's going to be super risky. Basically what I'm trying to teach him is that in the race, if he's not comfortable, he doesn't do a Gavin and launches anyway, because I'm Gavin and I've trained and I've been in the X-Alps and I've done all this stuff. He doesn't have the hours to back that up, and he's not going to by the beginning of the race. So if I'm not with him in the race, I want him to be able to go, fuck it, this isn't my day.
Right.
And everybody needs to learn.
Can I jump in there, dude? One of the folks on the chat, Perspective, is asking what I think is a really good question. Can you talk about a specific example or experience where ground handling translates directly to flying? So not just
yes.
We play with our wings. It's a lot of fun to zip that around, but something in the air where you're like, thank God I practiced this on the ground, or whatever it was.
Great question.
Super easy. Okay. Two immediately come to mind, and I could talk about what you just said for an hour, but there are three ways that we feel a wing, and I should almost put it back to you guys. That they are speed bar, risers, so especially when you start flying at high aspect wings, you're flying on the Bs, but a 3-liner wing these days, you're flying on the Cs. So that's 2. The other one is 3rd, you're looking at it, right? We used to always say it's by feel. Don't look at your wing. You feel it, you feel it, you feel it. And that's the magic of ground handling. But when we're ground handling, we're looking at our wing almost always, correct?
Yep.
So basically what ground handling does is it reinforces 2 of the most important things. One is feel. So you have a little benign tip collapse, a frontal, a big asymmetric. You have any of these things that can really quickly wind you up and be a problem in the sky. You have it on the ground. You're looking at it, and you feel what that feels like over and over and over. If you're ground handling well, you're forcing that to happen. You're reaching up and you're snapping your A's, and you're forcing the wing to do all this bad stuff. And A, you learn not that bad if you react well, but B, you learn how to react well and immediate. If you get up into super higher aspect wings and things happen really much faster and cascades happen faster, that initial input is super important. We used to always just say, if you have a frontal, hands up. That works through an ENC glider still. They will recover if you do nothing. So we do the hands up because typically people that don't have a lot of hours or a lot of SIV will do too much. And then that's when you start getting a cascade.
Who would do too much?
What's that?
Yeah. We don't know anybody like that.
No, nobody does, right? Yeah. So it's hands up. You do that on a comp glider, you're going in. You cannot do that. The glider will not recover. And so that initial reaction, I just gave a talk about this down in Mexico, that initial reaction is super important. And those of you who are watching this is just a 2-liner discussion, but it's super relevant no matter what glider you do. If you Google Russ Ogden Sun Valley, or you'll find it on my website, Cloudbase Mayhem, there's like a 45-minute talk about that he gave back in 2012 at the World Cup on a bad weather day we couldn't fly, about all of this stuff, about the difference between a 2-liner and other gliders in terms of how you have to react. But that initial reaction is relevant across the board for all the wings. And so ground handling, to answer the listener's question, ground handling teaches you all that on the ground where it's safe. And so when you're in the sky, small example, you have a 30% deflation, right? Pretty big tuck, but not massive. What do? You lean away, a little bit of the other brake, you can fly it dead straight. And then there's several different ways you can get it out. You can tail slide, you can pull the stabilo, you can just fart around. It's going to come out. Mostly you just nice pull brake, don't spin it, and it's going to come out, right? What if you have an 80% collapse and you lean and you pull this brake? You're going to end up in a super nasty locked-in spiral, okay? If you have an 80%er, you have to go with that. And within about 270 degrees, all that energy is going to die, and you're going to have plenty of time then to deal with that collapse. If it's an 80%er, you might have a big cravat, but that's just usually that just whacks it out. But if you do what you're trained to do, lean away and a little bit of brake, you don't have enough wing flying for that to happen. Woof, you're just going to wind up. You're doing absolutely opposite of what you need to do. And there's no way to learn that. Those of you who have never had that happen, that just listen to me say it, you're not going to do it right. The next time that happens, you're going to and blow it.
SIV,
the way to learn that is through proper SIV training that's regular. Every year you're doing SIV training over the water with a qualified instructor, and they're making you do that. And then you're like, oh, totally benign. I got that move. So ground handling is the ground version of SIV. And one of the questions I know that's coming, that, when you sent me the questions before, Robert, is do you how do you train for when should you start doing XC flying? Do you have to have all this stuff before? And the answer is no. You should start doing XC flying from your local site in little tiny bursts. But as soon as you start getting serious about it, man, I'd like to see people have solid ground handling skills and at least one SIV under their belt. But the SIV, I think a lot of people see that as like, oh, I've done my SIV. That's just the starting point. Andre Prochaska, who's on the show, one of the best acro pilots in the world. You haven't done nearly enough stalls. You haven't done stalls until you've done 300 stalls.
Oh,
very few people have done 300 stalls. Doing a stall should be like ground handling at Torrey. It's just nothing. You're not even thinking about it. Doesn't get your heart rate up. Doesn't make you excited. You know, the last day of an SIV, when they do that, when it's the full stall day, nobody can even talk. They're so shit scared. I mean, everybody's just like, oh my God, it's stall day. If you've done 300 stalls, you're like, whatever, dude. I've done so many of those. Doesn't even matter. So, yeah, I mean, Pal Tackett, who I had on the show recently, he thinks 90% of accidents would disappear if people could do proper wing overs and proper stalls. I'm calling it acro stalls. If you don't know what an acro stall is, then yeah, you got some work to do. But that's amazing. That's not a real statistic. That's just his opinion. But that dude's a pretty good pilot, and I think he's right. I've seen in all my years of flying, I've seen a handful of people be able to do a proper wing over. You know, a lot of people go, yeah, man, I can do wing overs. Doubt it.
I'm going to put a plug in right here for, this is for Andre's website that he put together. It's called groundhandlingchallenge.com. Can everybody see that? I'm going to put that up. Just real quick, if you get a chance, go to that. It gives you some challenges. Starts off, yeah, I might see my internet is really slow, but it starts off with some simple tasks, and then towards the bottom, you're going to get to what's labeled in like a red color, which are more extreme challenges. And then you can also take your videos and put them up on here, and he gives all those details on his channel, and which, by the way, I don't know if you heard earlier, but he's going to be on the show, I think, in the end of this month. So I'm stoked about that. I've been watching his videos for some time now, and he has some really good quality videos, and I know that he was hanging out with you. And
yeah, he's a good dude. He had that like 30-day video challenge too. He put up a new video, and they were good.
They were good.
30 in a row. It's like, geez, I mean, he's super into video, and he's got some cool. He's a pretty new pilot too. He's pretty low hours, and he's chasing it hard. And but he's getting after it. That ground handling challenge, actually, he tapped into me before that went live just to get some more maneuvers and some more stuff to put on there. I was really impressed. He's really thorough, and you got to make it fun. And that's what he's done. You know, if you're getting bored ground handling, you're doing it wrong. It's super fun. It's exciting, and so, but you want to make it a game. You know.
Yeah.
Gavin, there's a question that popped up on the chat there, and I kind of had a question about. I've heard you talking the Cloudbase Mayhem about how you really pushed it hard when you started out and just went full on into this sport, and I was just curious about your personal progression, how quick you went from a A to a B to a C to a comp glider, and what you think would be. I know it's different for every pilot, obviously, but what would be a good progression of experience? This guy's asking specifically jumping from a B to a C glider, which is what I just did. And I kind of knew when I was ready. And I feel like anybody should know when they're ready to go up to that next level. But again, I was just curious about your personal progression when you were newer.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, two questions there. I mean, my own personal progression was really fast. For whatever reason, you know, my history in sport and my history with, you know, extreme sports, I guess, you know, like the whitewater kayaking and the rock climbing and the skiing and downhill skiing. I guess I had the right risk tolerance, love of it. You know, like give you an example, the first 2 tandems I took, I was like asleep within 15 seconds. I was like, this is super stupid. I mean, no wonder I haven't done this for 10 years, because all of my buddies, you got to go paragliding. I was like, God, it looks really boring. They're just floating around up there. And then I went on a tandem, and I was like, yep, it's really boring. And then, of course, I learned when you grab the controls and you're in charge of your own life and about acro and stuff, I was like, wow, this is a lot more exciting than I thought. And then, and again, once I learned that there was cross country, I was like, whoa, oh my God, wait, what? You can use them to travel? So back to your point, though, my first wing was a Zulu Jin Zulu, which was like a low end B. Flew that first summer, and I flew maybe 200 hours that year. I mean, I was like totally obsessed. So And then we were still doing the boat thing. So that was back in 2006, and we were sailing around the world, and that was kind of between the first boat and the second boat. So that summer I was living in Hood River and then in Seattle, and I got my license down at Superfly down in Utah, and then just flew as much as I possibly could that summer. But then we moved back on the boat where we didn't have an opportunity to fly much at all. So I got a winch, didn't know how to use it, but I got a winch. And then pretty early on, because Jody was out there and she was shooting pictures and we were sending in stuff, and the magazines were like, oh my God, these are really cool. We didn't know how to fly very well, but we were in these amazing areas. And so she was getting good images. Some very good friends of ours, Mike and Stu Belbus, they own Verbier Summits Paragliding. They're British. They're over in Verbier in Switzerland. They run an awesome school. They're awesome guys. They're twins. They've been doing it forever. They came out to the boat. They taught us how to use the winch. They had a deal with Gin, so we got set up with Gin for a little while. So I went from the Gin Zulu to the Gin Rebel, which was previous to the Tribe, which was the ENC. And I probably didn't have the hours to be on that wing, but that's just, they wanted pictures of it. And then when I get off the boat, like one year we went to Beer in India, and that's kind of where I got my first 100K flight, and went to the Alps and did a trip with Toby Colomb, which is passion paragliding. I really recommend these trips, especially when you're early on, because it's like they know where to take you, and they can see how good you are, and they can give you a lot of advice, and so it's fast learning. I put the Rebel in because we had flown so much in the ocean over using this winch, and we landed it so many times in the ocean because we didn't know how to use the winch. That glider was probably not trimmed very well. And one of the days when I was in Beer, we were farting around at this place called 360 with John Sylvester and Eddie Colfax and all these legends. They've been over there forever. The Himalayan Sky Safaris are also amazing. And I went totally parachutal in that wing and went from 300 feet off the deck right to the ground and walked away. It was one of these crazy, like, holy shit. And everybody that was watching, A, thought I was dead, but B, was like, what the hell is wrong with that wing? Because I reacted what looked like from the ground totally correctly. At that point, I'd done quite a few SIVs and anyway, weird air. And so then, thankfully, because that wing was probably not very good, we switched to Niviuk because Niviuk started seeing all these pictures, and they made us a better offer. And I've been with Niviuk ever since. So that was probably 2007 or 2008. We switched to Niviuk, and I flew the Arctic for at least two, maybe even 3 seasons. So that's kind of like an ENC, and started really training in the Alps when we got done with the boat in 2011. And so did a bunch of acro training with Jockey and Olu Deniz in Turkey that spring, and did a lot of that year was the first 300-hour year I got, was 2012. And did my first comps that year. I did an open in Chelan, and then got a wild card for the World Cup here in Sun Valley, so I moved here the day before that started. And that was the first day I flew a comp wing. So that's a really cool story. I called Niviuk when I found out I got into the World Cup. I'd been in one comp, okay? And I got into the World Cup because it was a wild card. I didn't qualify, but I was moving to Sun Valley, and the guy that was running here was really cool, and he'd seen me doing all these cool flights in Europe. And so Niviuk lent me, at that time it was an Ice Peak 6, so I'd never flown a 2-liner. I'd never flown a D. They weren't even Ds back then. They were comp wings. And my first flight here in Sun Valley was the first time I'd been on oxygen. And I'd never been over 14,000 feet. And you're going to have to beep this, but the very first flight I had here was the day before the comp started with a guy named Nate Scales, who is now a great friend and a really good flying partner of mine. It was really smoky from all the fires we had that year. And we launched off Baldy and flew 100K FAI triangle, which back then was a pretty big deal, but it was certainly a big deal for me. And you couldn't see the ground because there was so much smoke. And we went to 800 feet, which is way over our legal limit. And the water bag on my back froze solid, not just the tube, the whole thing. Oh. And I mean, we were tall, super tall. And I'd never been over 14,000 feet. I'd never used oxygen. I mean, we landed at the end of that day back at the LZ, which we still to this day we never do. It's hard to do triangles here because there's usually a lot of wind and we're going downwind. And the tandems were just coming in from the the evening flight, and I was on this glider that I'd never flown except that day, and I didn't realize how much more glide they had. So I set up perfectly to land in our little tiny LZ and flew right over it. There's like 30 people just sitting there waving, and I'm like, ah! And almost landed in the river. And Nate Scales, I'm not going to do this impersonation very well. I'm sorry, Nate, if you're listening to this, but it was like, that fucking guy is crazy. And he was so excited because we flew wingtip to wingtip all day because I didn't know where I was. You couldn't see the ground. And every 10 minutes he'd get on the radio and he'd be like, welcome to Sun Valley. And I was like, oh my God, this place is crazy. And then anyway, so then we had that World Cup, and that was the first time I'd flown a two-liner, and I've been flying two-liners ever since. So back to your question, kind of a rapid ascent, but back to your question, I always use the kayaking analogy because it makes sense to me. You don't kayak class 4 until you're hitting every eddy on class 3, right? You're working the river. The river's not working you. You're not like, whoa, oh, hey, well, I didn't mean to be in this rapid. I was supposed to be over there. Like, you're nailing every move. And I think that's the same with paragliding. What really gets people is when you go to comps or when you fly with better pilots who are on better wings and they go on glide and it's like this, right? And you go, I need a wing with better glide. I need a wing with better glide. I can't keep up with these guys. That is not when you step up. When you step up is when you are mashing full bar all day. You can land anywhere. You've got it. This wing is boring. I'm bored. I'm bored with this wing. I need a better wing. And that's when you move up, and it's an hours game. I mean, really, 150 hours is minimum. If you're not getting 150 hours a year, I don't think then you should step up anyway. Now, there are, at the other end of that, there are guys like Josh Cohn, who's one of, if not the best comp pilot in the States.
Which, by the way, we want to get him on the show, Gavin. I need you to talk to him.
Sure, I will. But he's like, they call him a Josh pot. He's so good. Yeah,
he's a champ.
He's got a real job and a real life, and he gets like 75 hours a year, but he's been flying so long that rule doesn't apply to him. I'm talking about people like learning and coming up. So that's my answer is don't move up the wing until you're the class, you're in class 3 water and you are definitely ready for class 4 water. It's the same thing with paragliding. There's just, everything shifts with the higher aspect wing. They're way harder to recover. There's way more performance, but they're way harder to recover. And so you have to have much better instincts, and there's no way to get those instincts unless you're trained.
I want to talk about your book, The Deep Line.
My mystery book.
So what's the is this I just stumbled on it. I didn't even know you're writing a book, or if it's finished, or if I'm stepping on dangerous territory. Is it right there behind you on the?
No. The manuscript's over there, but so I got the manuscript done before Alaska. Alaska was spring 2016, and I sent it out to my editor, a very good friend of mine, a guy named Michael Bahar, who's written about. He wrote about the Rockies Traverse for Outside Magazine. Great writer, amazing, and he loved it. And he gave me a whole bunch of edits, and we decided we were going to put. At that point, I hadn't done Alaska, but Alaska was the plan. And we thought, okay, well, wait till you do Alaska, and then Alaska becomes like the epilogue, and that'll be cool. There is no deeper line. That's the ultimate deep line.
Right.
And so we're close, but so far. So the short answer is I didn't get back to it after Alaska. I didn't get back to it after the X-Alps. And now there's this little rugrat who I really dig, and I'm putting a little focus into her. So yeah.
That's awesome, bro. By the way, all my kids, you have to
watch. Get done.
Can you stop? You watch your mouth. I've got all my kids in there watching right now.
Okay, you got it. Sorry, I do have
no, you're fine.
Actually, though, the other one that
tell me.
Also happened, which I haven't written the word of yet, is when we get to about episode 100, we're going to take that all down and do like a Tim Ferriss, Tools of Titans.
Yes.
So, we'll distill that all down, and of course, because I love going back and listening to them as well.
Yeah.
But that'll be like a Bruce Goldsmith's, 50 Ways to Fly Better, but just thicker. And Bruce has been on the show. There you go. Yeah, perfect. Awesome. But that'll be great. I'm really looking forward to that. But that'll be easier because that's kind of written. Everybody's already given me all those little nuggets.
Right. So is it going to have some technical stuff in there? Are you going to give some nuggets of learning and lessons?
It's going to try. I'm going to try to be everything in that. I mean, I think I'm going to try to, because a lot of the Cloudbase Mayhem is just cool stories. People's most epic flight and that kind of stuff. But we can glean a lot from those, of course. But people like Josh are more oriented towards technical side of stuff. So I'm going to try to have everything from gear, bivy, SIV, ground, the whole mix, and then hopefully filled in with good stories to kind of keep people entertained. Kind
of a funny story. I posted a video where I full stalled at Little Black as about 10, 15 feet off the ground, and Nick was there.
I'm assuming not on purpose.
Not on purpose. Yeah. I'm flying a super old wing. I'm heavy-handed, and I'm trying to spot land. I have no business doing that. And anyways, I see this comment come from Josh Cohen, and I had no idea who Josh Cohen was. And he's like, "Have you had your trim checked on your glider?" And I'm like, "No, it's an old wing. I probably shouldn't be flying it, blah, blah, blah." And I just kind of brushed him off, and thanks for watching my foolish little video. And then he comes back at me and he's like, "Hey, I recommend that you check this out. I put your video on paragliding topic or whatever on the forum, and we're analyzing your video." And I'm like, "Oh no." So I don't know. And so we get in this little pissing match, and someone's like, "Hey, you should check out who you're talking to. This Josh Cohen is like a world champion." I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
And I told him, and by the way, I just messaged him on Facebook. I'm pretty sure I messaged him on Facebook to have him on the show because I want to talk to him. Yeah. And make that right. And I'm like, I have a friend who's friends with Gavin, and I heard you were on his show, and I'm small. It was so funny. All of that is still public.
Speaking of really cool information that comes from the podcast, we did one a while back with a good friend of mine, Revis.
Yes.
And we talked specifically about that. I was like, what is the number one thing you see, or not the number one, but what's something you see that most people don't think about that lends to accidents? And he was specifically talking about ridge soaring pilots, so pilots that soar instead of, flying XC, and wing speed, and it was how important it is to keep wing speed up, because when you're ridge soaring, you got all this sea breeze, right? You got all this wind coming in. And so when we come into land, we're barely moving. Sometimes we're going backwards a little bit. So it messes with our heads that, we don't need to be going that fast and we can be safe. Well, your wing's still going 40K an hour. You're not, but that's because of the wind. And suddenly you're flying XC and you try to slow that thing down to landing in a little helipad kind of, or a little postage stamp. And whoa, what happened? My wing just disappeared. That's never happened before at Torrey. It's not something that's obvious. It's super obvious, but it's not something our brains think is obvious, and it's tricky, so just another one of these little golden nuggets that even I've never thought about that. It was just like, yeah, of course, wing speed is super important.
That brings me to an excellent question. You've asked just a couple of the guys on your podcast. You've asked this question: if you could change one thing about paragliding, what would you change about technique and bad habits and stuff like that?
Well, okay, so in my prep for that, I read it a little bit differently.
Yeah, sorry, I may have mixed that up.
Well, that's okay. I might have to change this, but there's a lot of things that you hear on the show over and over again. So I'm going to try to be different. But for me, it would be attitude.
Ooh, very good.
I think that the negative kind of ground set attitude, the weather, oh man, I had an accident 2 weeks ago. I saw an accident. Somebody told me about an accident. There's accidents everywhere. This sport doesn't work with a bad attitude. You're gonna crash. If you have a bad attitude, you're going in, period. And so how do you teach somebody to have a good attitude? Nick and I have actually talked about that. And Josh is actually really good to talk about this. So I'll leave it to Josh when you guys have the conversation with him. There's great books on all this. Nick's got some awesome ones. But I naturally have it drives people nuts. You saw it in the Rockies tours. Will Gadd calls me the what does he call me? The pathological optimist. Dave Turner got sick of it. He was just like, dude, this isn't going to work. Why do you keep thinking this is going to work? We've been out here for 27 days. It doesn't work. And I'm like, I think it's going to work. I think it's going to be awesome. So I just naturally am pulled the other way. But that's not something I was born that way, whatever. I can't tell people how to be that way. But what I see a lot of in this sport that really causes a lot of trouble is attitude. I just saw it, for example, down in Mexico. I'm at this comp, and there's always this at comp. The comps are awesome. You learn a ton from comps, but there's always the crowd that they don't like the task, or they got all, it's not safe enough. It's not blah, 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 blah. And I was on the task committee, and I thought it was awesome task. But, it basically like whiners. I don't think that belongs in this sport. It's paragliding. Like, no one is going to remember who the world champion was last year. There's maybe 200 pilots that know the answer to that, and no one cares. It's not supposed to be that serious. It's supposed to be fun. It's super dangerous. So we can't hide that fact. We can't hide behind that, that it's not. It is. And so let's take that on board. And, but to me, to not be scared of it, you've got to have a good attitude. When things get dicey, it's like the Bill Belcourt thing, episode number 1. You got to bring it. And that's training. That's mental training. And that's, you are going to stuff your glider into the lee at some point, over and over and over again, especially to be good. If that scares the crap out of you, probably not the right sport, or you shouldn't be flying cross country. If you're kind of like, I think I got that move. I've trained for that. I've done the SIV. Okay, a little bit scary, but I got this. Yeah, I'm with you, Wing. Same thing, whitewater kayaking, same with anything. If you just shut down, and I think that's attitude, you're gonna have a problem. So I think it's not just attitude about like the bringing it side of thing. I think it's just positive. It's just being positive. It's and I am super active about avoiding those people. If I'm going up to a comp and the weather's maybe a little bit off and I got the dude in my ear that's telling me how dicey the day is going to be, I'll jump out of the car. I'll put my headphones on. I prepare for that. I've got earplugs. I don't want to hear that stuff. It's just not good. It's not good for your brain. I don't know how to ditch it, so I'm not going to take it on board.
Nice.
Yeah, I think we both come across that, Nick and I, and I think we both learned that probably from Gavin's lifestyle, if you will.
Did I hear you call it a ground suck attitude? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, that's what we call it. So it's like the whole. I'll give you a great example of this. Do I want to talk about this? Yeah, let's talk about it. Okay, so my best flights have always been when I'm alone. And so I started wondering about that because, on paper and, what you learn at comps and what you learn just period in flying, if there's one more person, you're sampling twice as much air. If there's 4 more people, you're sampling 100% more air. So, you're way faster and you're way more efficient with more pilots, especially if they're good, right? However, best just happened down in Brazil. It happened on my record here. It happened on my personal best before my records. On my record day, it was super dicey. It was way windy, way too windy to fly a paraglider. I shouldn't have been in the air. It was totally overdeveloping. There was Virga chasing me all day. Had I been with more reasonable people that day, usually here there's 4 of us. There's Mitch Riley, there's Nate Scales, there's Matt Beechner. And when you're going big, it's, Willie Cannell now, I'm missing some people, I'm sure, but there's usually 2 or 3 people on launch. And had I been with any of those guys, we would have been, what do you think about the weather? What do you think about the weather? What do you think about the weather? I don't know, it's looking pretty dicey. And we would have landed 100K into that flight and gone and drink beer and swam in the river, and I would have never known that I'd missed a record-breaking day. And so, not to say I should have stayed.
Yep, looks like you're breaking up a little bit for me there.
Yep.
Yeah. Only had a couple hours sleep, so being really tired was actually really helping. I was flying really well. I had it. I got it. I had a couple massive blowouts because it was a super strong day, and I was just like, yeah, but big deal. I'm tired. Keep flying. So it was the right day for that to happen. And had I had other people in, we would have had ground suck. That's what ground suck is
right.
Everybody talking everybody out of the air. What do you think? I don't know. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I think it's kind of dicey. I think it's kind of dicey. Now, I'm not trying to promote flying on stupid days. The opposite of that. The reason other people make the sport safer is because, your consensus can be a good thing, except when it's not. And sometimes it's not. And so mostly when I talk about ground suck, what I'm talking about is on launch. You just start getting that thing. I don't know. You got to fly the day. You got to fly your capability. How good you are. Your wing. What you're capable of, and you have to make the call whether this is the kind of day you can go or not go. I am not encouraging people to fly on the bad days. Wait for the good days. That was the genius from Chris Santacroce's thing. You don't need to fly on the days like I did when I got my record. No one should ever fly on a day like that, including me. Though the good days will come around if you stay in this game long enough, and if you fly the crappy days, you're going to get hurt. There's only so many coins you can take out of that luck jar, and that your moments, your coins coming up if you play that game. So I'm not encouraging that. I'm just saying that you want to avoid the ground suck mentality because you'll never launch if you don't.
Do you think it's something that's natural? That just certain people, how they're raised, or some people just have that instinct?
I do. I mean,
so what's your advice to somebody who has that?
Actually, more careful about self-preservation. Maybe.
What do you tell somebody that has it? Do you even bother?
Do I tell somebody have a better attitude?
Like, for example, I've been on launch before. Nick and I have been on launch before, and I don't want to name anybody because they're probably all watching right now. But we're on launch. We're getting ready to go, and they're standing there with their hands in their pockets. I've seen it probably 10 times. Well, Nick will come up and he'll look at me, and he has this look, and he goes, "What's everybody doing? Like, what's the holdup?" And we're like, "Oh, we're just assessing, and we're watching the cycles." And he'll be like, "It's flyable. Let's go." And then it's on, and usually one of us, we're both cuckoo and we'll both fly, out of the gate for the most part. And don't tell anybody this, but I've started learning by myself. I was just watching YouTube videos, and I bought a wing off of eBay, and I broke all the rules, and I didn't get any training.
Shame on you. Yeah.
But anyways, what I'm getting at is we've come to these people that, do you mention it? Do you say, "Hey, what's up? What's the holdup?" Or do you just, like Nick does, just go fly?
No, because that's not everybody has their own way to do it. Some people just need more time. The other problem with this having this great attitude is when you're learning, you don't really know what is a good sky and what's a bad sky and what's a good flyable day, and what you in some ways you have to be kind of a lemming in the beginning. And so when you're a lemming, it's here's the key: find the people on launch who are unpacking really fast and look badass, and they're super confident.
Yeah.
So get the launch and find me or Josh Cohn or Nate Scales, and everybody's like, awesome, I can't wait to go. Not the people that are standing around with their hands in their pockets.
Yeah.
That's not your responsibility to take them, because they need, they don't have it yet, and they have to get their own, they got to get the little hamster wheel spinning in its own, time frame. And so, no, that's not where I do say stuff is like at a comp, and I'm on the way up, and I got this guy telling me about his latest accidents.
Oh,
I don't like to hear that stuff. So I'm really blatant about that.
Yeah.
Hey, dude, I'm going flying today. I don't want to hear about that right now. I want to hear about how awesome today is going to be. There's a couple of those guys, they never shut up with that stuff. And so I will tell them. But what you're asking about really more is, if you guys if you can come up to launch right now and assess, this is on, this is good, I'm going to fly right now. Wait a minute, why are these 20 people not flying right now? Forget them. They're totally irrelevant, and you're wasting time. You've got time to be in the air to have fun and go paragliding.
Yeah.
And time that we can be in the air that we're on the ground is just stupid. That doesn't make any sense at all. So yeah, I mean, that, you see what I'm saying? That's kind of two different things. When you're learning, you have
this, Gavin, because we'll kind of beat this dead horse and then move on.
People that have more experience and that are solid and follow them. But you guys would come up to me, say, for example, in Sun Valley on a really on day, and it's like 10 a.m. and Nate and I and Farmer and Willie, we're all like super stoked. And you guys rock up, and we've never met you before, and we don't know your ability, and you're psyched, and you're like, hey, you guys are going, I'm going. Well, okay, if we're good pilots and we're safe and we're looking out for people, we're going to be like, whoa, hold on. I'm going to skip half an hour of my day sussing you guys out. Hey, do you know where you are? Do you know that this is Sun Valley? Do you know that thermal right in front of launch is going to be 12 meters a second? Have you flown in these kind of conditions? There's going to be strong valley wind today, and I'm going to give you a site briefing and tell you what's going on and the dangers and annoyances and the scary stuff and the great stuff, and and then we'll go flying.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of it, man. Getting the local intel. It's because every place is different. I've had the luxury to fly maybe 5% of the stuff you have, Gavin, but everywhere that I've flown this, in a different part of the country. I guess I have done South America. It's also different. Everything's so different. Every different place I've gone, and the locals, they point it out to you.
Totally, an encouraging thing here for you guys. Where it really starts getting rad, where it starts getting like super super rad, is like when you're in the X-Alps and you don't listen to any of the locals. That's a whole nother thing, because when locals really get to know their spot and they want to really be helpful. And it's blowing 40K. Nobody flies in that much wind, except X-Alps. And so that's when that's going to hinder you, And so, but what I'm talking about also is like Alaska or the Rockies Traverse, where this sport starts to get really, 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 really sweet, is when you can just walk up to a place that no one has ever launched, and you can totally suss it out. You know what's going on. You can read it. You can read the valleys. You can read the stuff, and that's the progression, and that's the magic, and that's the beautiful thing. I mean, I will always listen to the local briefing, but it's been years since it's been very useful to me.
Well, you're like a drop in the bucket of paragliders, Gavin. You're the elite of the elite, man.
That's great.
That's what all the hours and the training, that's where you get to, and that's when it's like, this is a paragliding launch. Wait a minute.
You're the one giving the briefing.
But look at this. It's awesome. It's going to work, And you know what time of day it's going to work. You can feel it. Oh, yep, it's on. It's ready. It's time to go. That's cool.
So your most epic flying day, and I want to just go here for just a second. You and we'll keep it brief. We're steady at 31 viewers. That's like a room full of people, right? I will say this, the next morning after we did our second show, we had like, I don't even know, 300, 400 views. So they'll watch it when they get home.
Yeah, of course. Most epic flight. So I'm going to give you one that everybody's seen, because it was the Denali Flight.
I'm pulling it up as you speak.
Not. Actually, that's not true. That's not true. Okay, I'm going to give you two. The Denali Flight, which I won't even talk about. That's in the movie, and that was epic because we'd sat there for 8 days. Dave and I had some tension. It snowed on us like crazy. We just never thought it was going to work, and then it worked. And it was, we had decided on the way up to launch that day. We were like, I mean, that whole expedition, we were like, we're flying together. We're landing together. It's a matter of safety. We're not going to do our own thing, even though we're both very independent pilots. But that day on the way up, we were like, dude, we're on our own. If you send it and I land in 5K, then good for you. But we're not, we'll fly together if it works. And at one point, that's actually in the movie, I get sucked into this cloud kind of on purpose. I needed the height. And he took he was about 15K ahead of me at that point, and he'd taken a line out into the flats that really made sense because it was starting to really storm up and get quite scary. And so he took this line out in the flats, and I'd been behind him, and I needed a big climb to catch up. Stuffed it into this cloud, came out of the cloud like 20 minutes later. Half the time I was flying the wrong way, and because I couldn't keep my instrument going. And anyway, and so I flew out of this cloud, and then it just happened that I was on this much deeper line into the mountains that worked out better. So I landed, I don't know, not far, but like 15K ahead of him. It took us a couple of days to get back together. That's not in the movie. But that was just a magical flight because it'd been something I'd been dreaming about for 6 years. That I'd scouted that thing a couple times in a Super Cub, but not this whole zone that you guys are all watching right now. Just flying past a 20,000 foot wall of ice was just incredible. I mean, that scenery, I mean, it was just like, this cannot be happening right now.
I really want to know the kind of camera they use to film you coming out of that cloud, because look at the zoom on that camera.
So all the wide, beautiful angle stuff was all Cineflex, and that's if you guys go to my Vimeo page, there's a making of video that shows how we did all that stuff. It's like 7 minutes long. And so that was all filmed from another helicopter with a big Cineflex lens where they're, when they were a kilometer away, they can zoom in on my nose hair. It was the most expensive lens as far as I know in the world. Proper nice stuff. All the air-to-air, like with the ice all over my face, that was just a GoPro that I was holding in my hand. The camera that I had on my risers was covered in rime ice, and it was useless. And so luckily I had another one in my pocket. When I came out of that thing and I looked at all my stuff and there's ice all over there, and I was like, oh my God, I got to get this shot. And I showed it to those guys a few days later when we got out of the park, and I was like, you guys are going to dig this? So yeah, we used it as the opening scene. But I got to give you, so right there where that arrow is, where the line is, the best flight, actually, the most memorable, most insane flight of that whole trip was the second day from the end. So when Dave left, the film crew, everybody left. I was on my own. They went back to Seattle, and I carried on. I had 3 days sitting in a tent with some bad weather, and then kind of a really scary flight to get out of that zone, just like 20K of SIV, and then I landed. And then the next day, beautiful launch, and it was sunny and it was gorgeous. And the next couple of days were always like 4 flights a day. Like the morning flight would be to get across a glacier or a big river, and then a proper middle of the day flight, and then maybe a bomb out, and then another one. But like the second day from the end, it was like super obvious that I was going to make it. I was still maybe 100, 120, 130K out or something, like 100 miles. And but it was working. I was having these big flights, much bigger than the Denali flight, and it was all coming together, and I was totally alone, and it was beautiful. And at this point, I feel like I'm flying well, and it just doesn't matter how much wind there is. Like, I'm not scared of anything. I'm just like, I'm getting there. And this one night, so I'd had the morning flight and then a proper midday flight, and like solar noon up there is about 2 o'clock. So, I launched at like 2 or 1, and like the mountains at that zone, I mean, they're not Denali in terms of height, but they were by far the most beautiful, and no one is in that area. Like even Kenny, my support Cub pilot up there, he's been living in Alaska for 30 years. He's flown everywhere. He'd never been out there. It was just like, it's wild. That's like the Susitna drainage, and it's just beautiful. Mount Deborah is like 4,000 foot hanging glacier. It's just beautiful. And there's no clouds on the mountains, and there's just beautiful cloud street out in the flats. But the flats there are literally almost sea level. I mean, they're really low, and I just couldn't. I've gained all this ground like there, like flying over that river. That's almost sea level there, and so I couldn't. Like the line was definitely out in the flats because that's where the clouds were, but I couldn't trust it. I just was like, no way, it's got to work in the mountains. What I later learned was all that air was dumping over from the north side into the south side of the range, and just all the thermals were being blown apart. So I should have gone to the flats. I didn't. I landed at the foot of this glacier, kind of in this zone right here, and it was like 6 p.m., which is still pretty early in Alaska. So I just did this X-Alps move. I packed up really fast and ran up this little hill, like 100 meters off the valley floor, and it was blowing quite hard, but the way that I was going. So I thought, well, if anything, I'll launch here, and maybe I can get a little zero, and I'll fly 2 or 3K, and at least I'm not walking 2 or 3K. Like walking up there was pretty vicious. So I, launched into all this wind and turned off downwind, and I'm like 100 meters off the ground. I'm right on the deck, and I fly over this huge herd of caribou, just thousands of caribou. They're all like, what the hell? And they're looking at this glide line right off the top of their heads. And I catch this little thermal, and it's literally just a zero. So I'm not losing any height, I'm not gaining any height. And I'm getting blown the way I'm going. I'm like, oh, whatever. Maybe I'll get 5K. Oh, maybe I'll get 10K. But I'm not getting any more altitude. I'm just enough to sustain. Like almost every turn was almost a land. Like, oh, okay, one more turn. And then 1 up, and then 2 up, and then 5 up. I went from less than 1,000 feet of like not even AGL. I was like 100 meters AGL, but I was like less than 1,000 feet elevation to 16,000 feet. It was on the Denali flight. I got to like 11, and I mean the whole like Alaska just went. It was just like, amazing, and I'm the only one up there, and I know for a fact no one has flown in this whole zone. And I turned downwind. I mean, it was just like I came out of this climb at like 16,000 feet, and I flew 50 miles without making a turn. And that was just
word.
I was flying like 90K an hour. There's all this tailwind, 100K an hour, just looking around, eating food, just like, oh my gosh, this is
so. At the end, you had like a good amount of days where to complete that task, you literally were what
4 days
out of what was it?
4 days. Yeah,
4 days.
So when Dave left, we were a little bit less than 2/3 through, and that had taken 33 days to get there, and then I did it in 4 days. A couple 100 miles.
What did your body do after that? Tell me about what happened to your body physically.
This was okay. So I'd lost quite a bit of weight, but not a ton, because when Dave left, I just carried all his food. At that point, I didn't care about weight, and I was just mowing because we had literally been proper starving. We were.
Hey, every pound of food you eat is a pound you don't have to carry.
Exactly. So I was eating a lot of like everything, and so at the end, I like Dave lost a lot of weight. I had lost quite a bit. I had pretty bad trench foot, so I wasn't like perfectly healthy by any means, but I wouldn't say it wasn't bad. Maybe I was 10 at the end. I was like 10 pounds lighter than I had been when I started. So, a lot of the weight at the end I gained back because it wasn't hard at the end. I wasn't walking that much, and I was flying a lot. But I did eat a lot of steaks after that was done, for sure. I stuck myself into the steakhouse for sure. This is a really interesting thing though. So
yeah,
that was June. Right when I got back from there, I went to Europe to train for about 10 days with Ben and Bruce for the X-Alps the next year, but we went over there to fly a bit. Right when I got back, I did a bunch of studies with a doctor that we'd found on a podcast, like a hormone, Olympic training, food, nutrition guru guy down in Pocatello. And he'd written a bunch of books, and we did like $1,000 worth of labs. So tons of labs on my blood. And I mean, we checked everything, testosterone and cholesterol, but all the weird stuff that I'd never even heard about. Because the hope is that we could build a diet for me, because at that point we had about a year between then and the next X-Alps. And we thought, I had some health issues with the first one, with swelling and weird stuff that Nick knows a lot about because he's done the Leadville and all that stuff. And he was one that put me in touch with Peter at Vespa. But anyways, at that point we thought, okay, let's do this huge range of labs and let's really figure out exactly what you need to be eating the next year. Kind of, we were thinking like fat adaptive diet and heavy protein and heavy fat. And we'll be able to make you probably 5% faster on the ground, which is a big deal over a 12-day race. And so great. So we did it. My blood came back, my stomach biome. So I had done the 10 days in Europe, so it wasn't just from the Alaska trip, but you can imagine in Alaska, we were mostly eating dehydrated stuff, which I wouldn't think of as like the healthiest stuff in the world. This is like the stuff that comes in the packages. I was eating a lot of salmon from Patagonia Provisions because they've got this awesome smoked salmon that comes in a little thing. But I mean, it was ramen, no fresh vegetables, ramen, salmon, and a lot of those dehydrated stuff. In the beginning, we were packing like in the food caches, apples and sausage and brie and, stuff, heavy stuff that had a lot of calories. But I wouldn't think of like, there was no broccoli in that diet.
No, you go up far enough north, you're only eating meat and canned stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm not trying to push people towards meat here by any means, but what was really interesting about the blood sample, when they came back, he called me up and he was like, dude, your stomach biome is what they will be using around the nation for, you have the perfect stomach. Your stomach we've never seen this before, ever. We've never seen this kind of health in terms of like bacteria and all the things that are supposed to be happening down there in a person. Like this is, you're setting a new benchmark. And so that was really interesting to me that, that I had been living off glacial water. That was probably pretty good for me, like tons of good minerals, but the diet was like starving and then massive amount of meat at the end of the trip. And yeah, pretty interesting. So paleo thing works. But
by the way, I was going to say, we want to put a plug in real quick. If you want some paleo treats, paleotreats.com. No joke. If you want to eat some
amazing.
Good.
I should have worn I'm into spiritual shit shirt. That's like my favorite shirt.
You gave him one.
Yeah.
So he comes many times. I'll drive. I tell him because I have a complex and I need to be in control. And so I'll drive, but he pays me with paleo treats. And so we have this great relationship. That's awesome. That I'll drive if he brings the paleo treats.
Yeah. You're getting the better end of that deal.
Yeah. Hey, so when are you coming down to San Diego to fly with us? What's the holdup?
Yeah, man, I like home. We have big mountains here. No, I gotta get down there. For sure this winter, I think Ben and I are gonna come train a little bit in Marshall for sure, and that's not too far from you guys. Just because it's a place you can come and get some distance in the winter. So, yeah, I'd love to come visit you guys. But thanks so much for having me on. That was a blast.
Yeah, you're welcome to come. If you want to stay, you're welcome to stay with us. We have I'll offer up Nick's house. You can stay there. I have 5 kids, so it's hard to. I don't think you want to stay.
5 kids or 3 dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't do well with the dogs. I do have bad allergies, so I'll go stay with Nick.
Yeah. Nick has the 5 dogs.
Oh,
so when you're out in the wild hiking around, if your allergies act up, does that mean you're being followed by wolves?
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
So you have like a spider sense.
Right. Yeah. No, it's just the domestic animals. They're the only dirty ones. Wolves are no problem.
Oh, by the way, did you end up coming across any bears when you were in Alaska?
Oh man, the bears were like mosquitoes up there. They're everywhere. Yeah.
Oh no, we didn't.
There
was none in the video.
We didn't have any issues with them. A little bit in the beginning. There's some track stuff. There's a lot of really good GoPro that we didn't have. It's kind of a bummer. I need to do something with the other, 500 hours of footage that we have from a 30-day expedition because we only, it's a 52-minute film, so you lose a lot of darlings. But there's some pretty good GoPro. We thought we thought day 2 we were done, but there's a lot of surprisingly few moose because we weren't really in the swamps, so they were really more before and after when we were driving around. We saw a lot of moose. one of the most magical flights we had was like at 1 o'clock in the morning flying across the Dillinger River. None of this is on the thing. We were both totally lost our mind at that point. We hadn't eaten in days. There was no film crew around. And it was like we went on this hike and fly mission this day to get to Dillinger. So we did like 12,000 feet of vertical that day and on no food. But each one of us had like one package of oatmeal, which we didn't eat. We just swallowed. We didn't even cook. And anyway, we went to fly, and I couldn't even get we were both so hypoglycemic. We were out of our heads. And it was like 1 o'clock at night, so it's not dark, but it's pretty dark. Up in Alaska that time of year, the sun just kind of dips below the horizon and then comes back up. And Dave launches, and I'm trying to get my wing, and I was like, oh, God. And I start hearing all this, pop, 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 pop. And it's Dave like firing off his gun just into space. He was like losing it. And anyway, that was, and so I launched laughing at him, and I looked down, and there's a couple Super Cubs down there, and I think I've told the story in the story with Ed on the podcast. You can hear this in the podcast. But anyway, Super Cubs mean people because bears eat Super Cubs. They never leave them alone because they get into those tundra tires, and it's like jelly beans. They can't leave them alone. And so I'm like, Dave, stop shooting your stupid gun. There's people, there's food. We could go land. And by the time he heard me, he was already too far across the river to fly back. So I went with him, and we kind of landed in this marsh. But before we landed, you could hear this big, I don't know how many, but big pack of wolves just doing their thing. Oh, man, it was so rad.
Wow.
We didn't see them. But we saw wolverine. We saw Dall sheep. We saw lots of caribou. We got like 4 feet from caribou. They did. I don't think they had seen people in that part of the world. The North Slope people don't go to, so they were just super curious. But lots of eagles. Flew with a lot of big golden eagles. That was pretty cool. But
that was a trip when Dave went fishing.
That was cool, man. Those were good.
I got a kick out. Yeah, I bet. And
Yeah.
Did you guys even bother cooking them?
Yeah, we cooked them. We cooked them on
Okay.
the fire, and that was a special evening. And that's when he decided to stay in there, to hang on too. So that was cool. We'd been
Yeah,
having like, well, I don't want you to leave, dude.
When was the last time you talked to him, by the way?
It's been a while, actually. It's been a while. Email a few months ago, but Dave's a cool cat, man. He's a different kind of guy, and that project was done, and that he's on to other things. So I mean, he hasn't come to any of the festivals. He hasn't, posted about it on Facebook. It's just, that's just how he rolls. But I know it was special to him. It's certainly special to me.
My food's ready.
Gavin. I don't know. We're getting close to finishing up. I think is one of them came up in the chat, and I had the same question: is do you talk to your wing when you're flying, and then what's next for you in paragliding?
A lot of people have been asking me that one. Yes, I talk to my wing all the time, and when I first get a new wing, I sleep with it. That might be too much information. That's supposed to be funny, but I
was like, okay, I'm
do.
writing this down. I'm going to sleep with my wing.
I
do too. I thought this was a normal
You get a new wing, it's perfectly packed, and it's like just exquisite. It's like, I got it. And then what's next? Because I just had a baby here in August, this year is dedicated to a lot of flying, and that's really just thinking about more towards the next X-Alps. We weren't going to do another X-Alps, but at the end of the 2017 race, as you guys know, if you watched it, this year was pretty brutal in terms of weather, and it was a massive ground game. And I've now told this story probably too many times, so if you've already heard it, I apologize. But
No.
So at the end, Bruce and Ben were like, "That's it, dude. Box is checked. You're getting old. We don't need to do this again." And I was like, "Cool, no problem. All right." But I mean, what we basically decided on was we're not even going to think about it for a year because you don't have to apply till July. So, what is it now? December. So we still got 6 months to even think about it now. And so it was basically like, let's not think about this for a year and just whatever. And 3 weeks after that race, I think I just had Fallon, my little girl. I got an email from both of them on the exact same day. Bruce is in Australia. Ben lives down in Albuquerque. On the same day, not planned. They hadn't talked to one another. They both sent me an email. It's like, let's do it one more time.
Nice.
And I was like already chomping at the bit at that point to do. I was just hoping that they would say that. And so yeah, we're going to do it again. And so for sure, my weakness in that race is flying. I'm good, but Kriegel's better. And so I want to just fly as much as I can this year. I don't have any big missions, and mission that I'm really thinking about I can't talk about because I don't want anybody to snag it. But no one would snag it anyway. It makes the Alaska thing look totally stupid.
It's not
so.
One other
What's
question for you, Gavin. Robert and I were talking about this today, and Kyle, Chris, this is kind of for you guys too, and really more for the U.S. paragliding audience. But we've been seeing that there's not really a ton of competition in California, and we're kind of getting psyched on like how could we make it so there are way more competitions. I mean, there's 5K runs every weekend everywhere in the States. There's barely even a nationals here. Like what's the exhortation there?
Okay. Yeah. I'll try to give you the short version of that, just because I got to get going. But so this year is actually, we've got more comps this year than we've had in most years. We've got, which is great. Woodrat has been run forever and ever and ever by Mike and Gail Haley. They're retired last year, but the club's still putting it on. So we've got that comp in June. Maddie Senior's putting on U.S. Nationals in Chelan, which everybody needs to do because Chelan is epic. So go there regardless of your ability level. Sign up now, pay now. It's awesome. I think it's actually going to be a pre-World Cup, so there'll be a lot of mentoring going on, and that'll be great. And then the folks out at the Tree Toppers, so Dave Hanning and those guys are putting on a comp in Virginia or Tennessee. Oh, God. I think it's Tennessee.
That's Tennessee.
Tennessee. And that's going to be cool. That's in September. So unheard of for us to have 3 comps in one season. Of course, it's nothing like Europe and the Swiss and the French and that kind of thing. So we still got a long ways to go, but that's cool. Secondly, you guys, California has a great league run by, help me out, Jug and oh gosh, I can't. I'm sorry, dude. I'm messing.
Maybe we need to make some more investigations here.
Yeah. So the league is just a weekend thing, and so that starts up here pretty soon, and they'll pick a site. So that'll be like Marshall, or that'll be Dunlap up by San Francisco, or that'll be Santa Barbara at Ojai. Every once in a while, actually last year when I was there, it came down right near you guys. They flew from a site just inland and just north of San Diego and flew north. And so that's super cool and totally geared around mentoring. So there'll be a handful of really good pilots there, but it's mostly pilots that are very much learning and so you learn how to put the waypoints into the machine, and you learn what a task is and what goal it means, and race to goal, and they might do some start gate stuff, and so kind of prepping you for a real competition. But those are just weekend events, and they call it on the weather, so they only have it if the weather's decent, and they do it right. So really cool. I don't know of any other league events around the country, so that's just a California thing. That's because it's run by those guys that are really keen on it. To answer your question, the problem with comps in the United States is no one's learned how to make money doing them, and they're a lot of work. And so people tend to go, oh, I really want to run a comp, and they run a comp, and then they lose a couple $1,000, and they're like, I'm not into that. I didn't get to fly in the comp, and I lost money. So that's the tricky part. The podcast that I'm putting up tonight, maybe tomorrow now because it's getting kind of late, but the podcast I'm putting up tonight is with Miguel Gutierrez, who is the legend about running. He's the guy that runs Valle de Bravo every year, the Monarca. He's run a ton of World Cups. He's run a bunch of pre-WCs. The comp I was just in down in Mexico, down at Zapoltec, he ran his team. It's not just him. He's got a whole team. And they have been amazing at getting like big money sponsors. So AT&T and Nextel, and it may be easier, maybe harder. I don't know about Mexico, but part of what the magic of what he's done is really tied into the local community and the mayors and the government and the big corporate sponsors. And so he can charge a couple $100 for a comp, and that's just padding. I mean, they're making their money from the sponsors. And so they're great comps for us to go down to because they're so incredibly cheap. Our comps in the States are usually going to be $550. I mean, that, for a week, that's not cheap. That's real money.
Yeah.
And yet the comp organizer's almost always going to lose money at that rate. So, you know, when you start throwing in big retrieves and a bunch of vehicles and a bunch of volunteers and housing and hotels, and, you know, they're a lot, they're logistically, they're challenging to put on. You don't get much sleep that week, and they take a year to put together, and then it's the money aspect. So they're trying to figure out, and, you know, USHPA's been really helpful with that. And, you know, hopefully we can get our comp scene back up to snuff where it needs to be, because it's important. You know, it's how people learn.
Gavin, really appreciate you coming, man. This is such what a privilege. You've been a huge inspiration for me and many, many other pilots. And just the fact that you would take the time to do this, I really appreciate it. Again, if you guys are watching, go check out his website, cloudbasemayhem.com. Also, check out our website for this chat, for this station. We're doing this on Thursday nights right now, and so far it's been really good and really fun. And if you are a pilot that has a lot to offer the community, please ping me, and I would love to have you as a moderator or even a guest on the show. We would love to have as much as we can learn from other pilots. And again, go to the website. It's paraglidingtalk.com, and check out the upcoming shows. We got Chris Santa Croce. He's going to be on the show. We've got Andre Bandera. He's going to be on the show as well. And then we've got some others coming on very quickly. An acro pilot, Getty G, is next up. Great pilot, expert ground handler. Guy can, if you haven't seen his stuff, go check him out. Amazing. And there was just a privilege, man. I'm stoked. And if it's okay, I'll send you an invite whenever we go live. If you're available and you see that it's live, just check your box and see if you've got that little invitation. I'll send it every time, no matter what, and you're welcome to pop on anytime on Thursday nights.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Happy Thursday, and send it. Yeah, fly far.
Thanks, Gavin. It's been a pleasure, dude.
Yeah, man.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for your time.
All right.
Cheers.